In history, there's always someone that moves and shakes and makes things happen. Good or bad, they always leave their legacy around. One of the figures from the previous century going on to now, the new century, is Vladimir Putin, the president, or some people call him the dictator of Russia. He has stirred a lot of controversy lately. I try not to be so concrete with some of my messages in regards to figures and maybe even making some dates or anything like that. But I think that it's very important for me to address this as a man of God because there's a lot of confusing information out there. Here in Power and Counsel with Pastor Sammy, one of the things that I have always promised you is what? You will get the real deal about everything so that we can supernaturally walk on water and receive that blessing and know what's going on within the times from a very different perspective. The biblical perspective, but also the spirit filled, wisdom, insightful perspective from the Word of God, but with the power of the Holy Spirit, with the understanding that there is a need for deliverance, but also for addressing emotional and mental health needs. So, today, in today's program, Power and Counsel, we are going to look at Vladimir Putin in a very unique manner. We're going to give him a political, emotional, mental, and a spiritual analysis. For that, we're going to do some digging into history, some digging into political moves that he has made, and sometimes even international policy that has been done. I don't want you to think that this is going to be a very boring episode. No, on the contrary. All of this is, all the controversy regarding Russia has left people with either anxiety or scratching their head, not knowing what to make out of it. Some of the paranoia says that Jesus is around the corner and he's about to come. Well, is he? We're not going to necessarily address that today, but what we are going to look at is the possible prophetic, and I mean like biblically prophetic timeline that we might be facing. However, whether Vladimir Putin is here or not, there has been a ransom on his head. I believe $1 million. If it gets met, I can guarantee you, it might die off. The Russian bear, as Russia is known, might go into some kind of hibernation, but Russia will come back. And the reason for that is because Russia is in Bible prophecy. If you notice, and I mentioned that before, and we talked a little bit more into the Bible prophecy aspect when we had Pastor Alfredo Sanchez in our program. Please look it up. You can look up that program and find out more information regarding the Battle of Magog, or what's really not really the Battle of Magog, but Magog is involved in that battle called Armageddon. Now, we will probably go into more details on that on another episode, but today I want to give a political, a spiritual, and a mental evaluation to Vladimir Putin. When you're looking at the news nonstop, what you're going to be left with is a lot of anxiety. As a matter of fact, one of the things I recommend for a lot of people is that if you have kids, stop having the news on nonstop to see what else, what building has been bombed, how many people have died, whether it be from a virus, whether it be from war. Stop leaving that on. You need to understand that they want to entice you and give you bad news all the time. And sometimes you keep on hearing the news and you're like, I didn't really need to hear that. They made it to be something that was not really necessary to hear. Because of that, I do want to give you the biblical, but a political perspective that a lot of people are not looking at. So, before you accept the narrative of what the mainstream media tells you, before you accept the narrative of what some people are prophesying out of their emotion, let's look at carefully what went on in history that is leading Vladimir Putin to attack Ukraine, that is letting Vladimir Putin respond the way he is to some people, irrationally acting. So, is Vladimir Putin lost his mind? Is he in a mental health decline? Has he lost it in his head? Is he developed a mental illness? And that's why he is acting erratically. Or is he demonized? Is he demonically possessed? Or is there a political resolution that could be easily solved and the crisis done away with? We're going to look at all three. Now, it is very important. If you have heard the news, and again, all you are is left with anxiety, in this program, you're going to find out exactly what's going on, have a clear understanding without constantly be hearing the news nonstop, have a spiritual perspective, but also knowing and being prepared as to what to do if we are going to be facing the end times. So I ask you to please make sure that you share this message with as many people as possible. This is something that you're not going to hear anywhere else. No one else is talking about the mental health implications of Vladimir Putin. No one else is talking about the possible implications of demonic possession or the role of Satan in this war. And no one else is looking at the Bible prophecy as well as the political aspects, but only in this program, Power and Counsel with Pastor Sammy. So I need you to please do me a favor. Share this message with as many people as possible. Click on that like, and also, if you haven't done so, click on that subscribe button, please, and follow us. Activate the little bell and follow us. The subscribe button is very essential in Spotify podcasts. We are there, and for those that cannot be watching, but you can be hearing while you're at work, please follow us on Spotify. Or if you can follow us on Rumble or YouTube, please, we need your help there as well. Now, before we move on, I do want to give some shout outs. We got quite a bit to go on with. We have some new followers and people who have subscribed to all our formats. First of all, we have Tangi Thompson from Arkansas. Tangi, thank you so much for joining us along. As a matter of fact, I was able to have a very good conversation with Tangi a while back, and she gave me some good insight that I was able to probably share with some other ministers. Thank you so much, Tangi. I really appreciate your wisdom, and thank you for joining us here and following us here in Power and Counsel. We also have Sarah from the United Kingdom. Sarah, we haven't heard from you from quite a while, but we thank you because you have reached out to us before, and we want to say a hi. Vanji Franco also for greeting us on the success of celebrating life. Vanji Franco, thank you so much, and we hope to hear from you again. Also, we have Marty Rivera. Marty Rivera also subscribed not too long ago to our program Power and Counsel and began to follow us. There's a young man that I'm very happy to hear from him as well. I haven't heard from him in a couple of years, but I'm always happy to hear from him, and his name is Alex Serna. Alex Serna, thank you so much for also joining us here and following us on Power and Counsel with Pastor Sammy. We are trusting that more and more are going to join us, and you are going to follow us. And again, we have two more actually. We have three more actually. Cipriano Morales. Thank you, Cipriano, for joining us as well. And we do have some people that their names don't come across at all. We just see the numbers move up. But some people, that's because they're probably their accounts are on private. And then some people don't have their full name on the accounts, so they have, I guess, an online name. We have Nanz906. NANZ 906. Thank you so much for joining us as well. We have Soy Inmortal 1. Soy Inmortal. Wow, I'm curious to see who you are. That's an interesting online name. Soy Inmortal. Thank you so much for joining us as well. Again, please, for the rest of you, like them, please subscribe to Spotify on podcasts, Rumble, and YouTube with Power and Counsel with Pastor Sammy. And as well, leave us a review and also share these messages with as many people as you can. Now, let's go back to Putin. Putin was born to a father who was a soldier in the Soviet Union army, and he had an incident. This incident, by the way, is shared by Vladimir Putin. Whether it's verified to be accurate or not, I don't know. I'm just saying it's coming from the primary source of Vladimir Putin himself. Vladimir Putin says that he did have older siblings that died, unfortunately, because there was attacks and there was still war going on between the Soviet Union and other countries. Unfortunately, there was famine, there was lack of food, there was attacks, and the Russians were dying by probably large numbers, and they were piling up corpses to do mass burials. His father came back from fighting in the war, and when he came back, he saw the pile of bodies. And when he approached them, he recognized that one was moaning and kind of whimpering. And it turned out that it was his wife. Now, of course, I said 1952, but 1952 is when Vladimir Putin was born. This happened before 1952. That woman, when he approached her, was his wife. And he pulled her out, took her back home, nursed her back to health. And that woman is Vladimir Putin's mother. Vladimir Putin survived his older siblings who also passed away due to the constant war and pestilence and famine that was going on in Russia because of World War II. Of course, he was born until 1952, but his older siblings died before Vladimir came along. He, according to Vladimir Putin, he shared that his mother, and this is in his own words, once my mother fainted from hunger, people thought she had died, and they laid her out with the corpses. Luckily, Mama woke up in time and started moaning. Now, again, he talks about how his father pulled her out and brought her and nursed her back. Now, already, like I'm telling you, I don't think a lot of people know this about Vladimir Putin or his actual sharing of his story. Now, we're going to look at this whole controversy with Vladimir Putin in such a way that you probably have not heard before. See, in the news, you're just hearing about what he's doing. In the news, you're just hearing about the bombings or whatever. Now, in no way am I trying to bring some kind of sympathy for the man, nor what he's doing, nor am I trying to make you a sympathizer for any side. But what I am trying to say is that it's important to look at what both sides are saying and what are we doing. In order to do an evaluation, we need to hear from that one person and get everything possible, and then we make a proper assessment. So today, that's what we're going to do. Now, we're going to talk about some very heavy stuff. That in itself, what Putin's mother went through, is traumatic. And a lot of people don't realize that what our parents go through, the trauma that our parents go through, they pass it on to you, they pass it on to me, and we then start expressing those things in such a way that we thought we never would. It's called transgenerational trauma, and it affects the way we react. It affects the way we think sometimes, even though we think differently and we are taught differently and we start doing things differently. Psychologically, that trauma sometimes comes back up and makes us react in such a way, not based on our own experience, but on the experience of the trauma of our ancestors. Moving even more into the deeper side, we also have generational curses that come up when our ancestors have gone through some kind of abuse or some kind of pact with the occult. Here in this situation, we have Putin's mother that went through such a traumatic event, and upon conceiving Putin, a large portion of that trauma has gone into Putin. Psychologically, we now call that epigenetics, EPI, and then genetics, epigenetics. It's been proven that trauma can be, and now I would say in the spiritual, it probably will be transferred. Now, if you, as we're going through, some of this kind of strikes a nerve, and you might think like, oh man, this is like giving me the chills, maybe you might hear this in the cold winter right now, and you're like, it's cold outside now, it's cold in my inside, and you're bringing up some things that it's making me think about what I've gone through. Then I do want to remind you, you can call us and we can have a time of personal ministry with you, and you can make an appointment or a spiritual counseling session at 216-810-6145. Again, I'm going to repeat it, 216-810-6145. We need your name. Please reach out as well. Connect with our ministry so you can continue to know where we're heading, where we're going to be at. Pastor Sammy Salazar.wow@mail.com. That's PastorSammySalazar.WOW@mail.com. Now, don't forget that we are in different social medias: Getter, Meetum, Gab, Partner, MeWe, Minds.com, Facebook, Instagram. On all of these, please share our messages. Now, don't forget, on Instagram, we only have like maybe 30 seconds of the message or a minute, but we need you to hear the whole program. Now, going again, let's go back to the basic information of President Vladimir Putin so we can understand this man and what's going on. What's the whole dilemma with Vladimir Putin? Ready? Whew, this is exciting. Let's warm up and get ready here because this is going to be some good information. I'm excited to share it with you, and I guarantee again, you haven't heard anything like this anywhere. I guarantee you. But the Spirit of God is going to open your hearts to see something very, very differently. Now, President or Prime Minister Putin has been in charge of Russia since the year 1999. He was known, and he came to power probably because of his experience working in for the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was the name of the country of Russia when they fell to the Communist Party. Okay, so the Soviet Union grew exponentially, which, by the way, they were in control of what we know now, the Baltic states in Eastern Europe. All the way down to Ukraine, by the way, where we're having the current controversy right now. But he was in charge of the KGB. Now, the KGB was during the communist rule. The KGB was in charge of foreign intelligence, and he was the top gun there. Okay. Now, the KGB stood for, translating, of course, from Russian, is Committee of State Security, meaning that they were in charge of taking care of the country's security, the leadership, and they were supervising the border, and they were supervising the troops and the general population, meaning they knew everything that was going on in the Soviet Union. Meaning Vladimir Putin knew how to get information and had information from everybody: soldiers, citizens, geography of Russia, and its enemies. This man knew how to get information, keep it quiet, or get rid of information, or bring information out from people who were probably dissenting. Of course, due to the nature of communism, communism has never proven to be profitable, nor has ever been proven to work in any nation, especially when it comes to a socialistic mentality when it comes to the economy. That's just a fact. I'm not saying that because that's an opinion. There has never been a government that has done well under communism or socialism. Now, let's move on. The Soviet Union failed. Economically, it fell apart. Because it fell apart, Russia went into a financial depression. When Russia fell into a financial depression, eventually, of course, they brought in Vladimir Putin, and within his first year and moving on to 8 years straight, he got Russia to prosper in their economy in a way that they never had before. Now, what's scary about this is that Germany went through the same thing too. See, when there is a loser in a war, they're hit with sanctions and basically a form of punishment. Russia basically kind of lost, even though we were in the Cold War, they lost. They were losing. They were losing big time. They tried to fight the war vicariously through the war in Vietnam, but as we know, no one really won the Vietnam War. They tried to also fight the Americans through the Korean War, but let's face a fact, there really was no victor. It was a draw. Korea is split in half between North and South Korea. You have the North, which is communist, the South, which is, democratic or free, capitalistic. There was no winner. They have not had a major victory. They were in defeat. And economically, they were suffering. Now, their communist party fell apart. Their nation fell apart. Because of that, the country was going through a social depression as well as an economic depression. Here, Putin, like Hitler, brought in a sense of pride in the Russian people and brought them economic success. Because of that, he was given free rein to probably do some unethical things, to the point that now he started taking away the Russians' freedom that they had gained once they became free, in regards to free enterprise and probably in regards to freedom of speech, and brought the country basically to an authoritarianism because the elections were not fair anymore, and whoever spoke against Vladimir Putin found themselves mysteriously in jail now, just like they were during communist Russia. Now, while Barack Obama was president, that is when we start seeing Vladimir Putin rise up, of course, during his time in office as well. While President Barack Obama was president of the United States, Putin began to stretch out his muscle. He started taunting President Barack Obama by showing that, he was more brownie, that he was more strong. He would, pose riding horses without his shirt. And Barack Obama seemed to be more like a Mr. Rogers kind of a thing, not necessarily a strong, aggressive fellow. But don't let looks deceive you. It could be that Putin was probably compensating, but he wanted to prove a point. If he felt that the president was weak, he was going to start stretching out and starting to stretch back to gain ground again. Now, what had happened? He began to start moving into areas where they were previously part of the Russian states, like Crimea. And he did so between 2015 and 2016 of the Barack Obama administration. Nothing happened. Now, the Russians have an ally, in the Middle East, Syria. And Barack Obama flat out told Syria, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. I draw the line in the sand. You will not cross this line. But guess what Syria did? They crossed the line. And Barack Obama had to eat his words because he was saying things that he did not fulfill. Now, I'm not saying that he should have fought the war. I'm just saying he shouldn't have said words and made empty threats, threatening Assad, who is an ally of Vladimir Putin in Russia, and then do nothing about it. What that did was that it showed President Putin that Barack Obama did not really back up what he was saying. Now, hold off before you get insulted if this is, your favorite president or you feel that he's the best for whatever reason. Hear the facts. That's what happened. Look it up. Some of us were around that time, but we quickly get kind of like an amnesia from what things have happened in the past. We need to remember what has happened and not forget it and share it, because a lot of people are forgetting and not putting and linking and putting the lines together. Or as they say, connecting the dots. Now, what happened was that President Barack Obama and NATO started reacting by putting sanctions. Sanctions are like punishments or economic punishments on Russia. Now, what had happened to Germany during World War I? They lost the war, so they were given sanctions, punishments, And that kept the economy of the Germans down. But that also brings a resentment from that country. And that resentment from that country comes back with full vengeance. It seems that Russia is ready to come back with that full vengeance. And they're not happy about those sanctions put under President Barack Obama. Now, in reality, I do want to tell you, those sanctions meant nothing to Vladimir Putin simply because they did not hurt him. And let me tell you why. If the sanctions were not on the oil and natural gas that he was providing for the whole world, even the United States, he was still making billions and billions of dollars. It meant nothing. It just looked nice, like I'm a tough guy. I'm doing something about this. And you took over Crimea, so I'm going to punish you. But it really did nothing to Vladimir Putin. Whew. The chilly weather starts heating up when we're looking at this stuff. It is controversial, but it has to be said. Putin saw that Barack Obama could not keep his word. Barack Obama was doing empty threats, and Barack Obama was trying to torture him, as someone might say, with a feather. Trying to whip him with a feather, or trying to punch him with a sack of cotton balls. It just did not hurt. So, what started happening is that in one way or the other, these sanctions still started provoking, as Russia is called, and as the Bible calls it, the bear. There's a term that says, don't poke the bear because you're going to wake him up. Russia seems to be like a bear that goes into hibernation, but then comes back out. When he comes back out, he tries to see if the situation is good to attack or not. If there is a weakling around, and therefore it can come out and be on the prowl. Now, what happened? That's what happened during Barack Obama's administration, which means that Putin took over and invaded Crimea. Now, here comes President Trump in the year 2016. He gets elected. He starts in the year 2017. And it seems that everyone is worried that President Trump is going to cause World War III, and he's going to go to war with Korea. North Korea starts sending bombs. Kim Jong-un starts doing war games and throwing missiles near Japan. He starts threatening that he will blow up the United States with nuclear missiles. And all this time, Vladimir Putin is just fighting. And people are calling on Putin to step in, and he's like, he's a psycho. I don't know. As long as he stays out of my hair, I'm okay. But it's interesting because between Vladimir Putin, he starts forming an alliance with China. He starts forming an alliance with Korea. He has an alliance with Iran. And he also has an alliance with Turkey, Libya, and some of the northern African states, as well as Syria in the Middle East. What's interesting is this. When we look at those countries united, they all have some kind of an interest on what they want to do. North Korea wants to take over South Korea. China wants to invade Taiwan. And Russia wants to go back and take over all the land that used to belong to the Soviet Union and make it part of its own again. Now we're going to look at why Vladimir Putin still wants to get this done. Now, to add on top of that situation, during that time, terrorism was still rampant under what we called, it used to be called Al Qaeda. It kind of morphed into ISIS, if you can remember that. President Trump comes in and he's stern, but he brings peace and he brings settlement among North Korea. And Vladimir Putin starts seeing that this is a man that cannot be reckoned with. The bear decides there's another bear or a tiger. Let's just not get into it right now. I'll go back into my cave and hibernate a little bit more. Now, why am I telling you this? Because President Trump went straight to Europe, confronted and rebuked the German nations like Germany, and told them, look, I am protecting you. Americans are paying billions of dollars to protect you here in Europe. We have our bases here in Europe, but yet you're buying fuel from Russia. We are here to protect you from Russia, but yet you're buying fuel from Russia. And it's interesting because the President Trump was rebuking them and pulling his money and still bringing alert about Russia being a problem, but yet he was laughed at and saying, "What does this guy think? We're in the 1980s with the Cold War. That's been over and done with." I don't know if some of you remember that, but I remember hearing it during the debates. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is this: Russia has always been a threat. But the problem is that they have power because we buy their fuel, their oil, and their natural gas. And here Trump is telling them, and there's plenty of evidence and tapes and audio and video on how he's rebuking the Germans and rebuking the other people and telling them, stop buying fuel from Russia. Coming to the United States, Trump then says we need to be independent with our natural oil and gas. We have it here. We should not be buying it from them. Now, once Trump leaves the office, of course, he did not win the election. The new administration, President Biden, then shuts down a lot of the oil production, and he continues to buy from Russia, though he claims that they're the enemy. The Russian sleepy bear went to hibernate for a couple of months, came out, saw he couldn't, went back to sleep. President Trump loses, but the war. But it's not like if he didn't have to confront Putin at all. Within a year of his administration, but the year 2018, Russia starts what's called the war games. In the year 2018, a lot of people forget. Many people are saying, "Oh man, you better get ready because Jesus is coming." This is a battle of Armageddon. And look, here we are facing it all over again within 3 to 4 years. But in 2018, just 2 years ago, it was happening. Russia, with the help of the Mongolian army, with the Chinese, with the Iranians and the North Koreans, all started to make war games. And it scared people that World War III was about to break out. Because of President Trump's negotiations and other people stepping in, it got squelched. It didn't move forward. It got resolved. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is this. Things can be aligned prophetically according to the Bible prophecy, but they can subside if it's not time for the end to break out. But just the fact that the same countries, according to scripture, that are aligned and they're always kind of close to coming out into that war, and then they're kind of close to coming out, but then they back off. It's not that people are right. It's not that people are wrong, excuse me. And it's not that Christians are wrong when they're saying, this looks like Bible prophecy, because they're right. It is. It's just it's not time for it to happen. Some people say, well, that's it. Jesus is coming. And then the war and the situation is resolved. And say, I guess prophecy is not true because look, Jesus didn't come. I thought Jesus was coming. That's the problem of saying that we can put dates. But the fact is that one day Jesus will come. Whether it's before or after Armageddon, that is still debatable. But Armageddon has to deal with the fact that Russia will have this army with the Chinese come down through Ukraine, come down over Israel, have the northern countries from Africa help the Syria and Turkey help from the Middle East, have Iran come in and help as well to attack Israel. That will happen. And we see it as the nations align and whose side they're on. Now, I want us to keep on going. Now, here we see that Ezekiel, and we've mentioned that before, Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39 strongly speak about the alliance of Russia with the countries from northern Africa, like Libya, like Turkey, like Syria, like Iran, and as well as China from Revelation chapter 16, verse 12. So Revelation 16:12, Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39 seem to pop up here and there over and over and over and over again. And the reason for that is because it cannot go away, because we see that it is true. Within time, at the right time, it will break out, and there's nothing that we can do to stop it. Now, what are we? That's politically. Let's keep looking, okay? That's politically. Now, let's keep looking at it, right? Don't lose me. Vladimir Putin um, has some points politically that let's hear what our enemy has to say. If you want to consider an enemy, maybe in your country, Vladimir Putin is not seen as an enemy. You know that there's Christians on both sides, and that doesn't mean that everyone in that country goes along with what the leader is saying or with what the leader is trying to do. But I got some information from an evangelist Prince Favor Agbewosa. Okay, he is a minister as well. He's an evangelist, and he gave this nutshell of an analysis that I want to share with you as well. This is his political take. Now, again, he's an evangelist. He's an African evangelist, but he has a point of view from a different part of the world, not a Western world, but an African perspective. Pay attention to what he has to say. And this is how he listened. The US invaded Cuba in the 1960s because the Soviets wanted to build army bases in Cuba and brought about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Cuba is a few miles away from the US, so why should NATO and the US build a military base in Ukraine, which has a long border with Russia? Putin is not stupid. As it stands now, NATO and the US are unable to launch direct attack on Russia because of the distance. Putin knows if NATO and the US enters Ukraine and establishes army forces bases and army force bases there in in Ukraine, Russia will be finished. Additionally, NATO and the US breached the 1990 treaty, which prevents NATO and the US from expanding eastwards from the then East Germany. Now, what I'm trying that agreement from NATO in the year 1990 was that NATO was not going to spread east. Now, this is a lot of information. Hang with me. After World War II, they split Germany in half. They split the whole East Europe in half with what was called the Iron Curtain. And anything east was going to be under the influence of Russia. Anything west was going to be under the influence of NATO. Now, this is what's important. The reason it started getting compromised was because obviously the Russian Communist Party fell apart when the Soviet Union fell down. So that left kind of like a vacuum, and NATO starts saying, let's move in. Let's move in and take over. But the thing is, Vladimir Putin is coming back up. And while he knows that he can establish the Communist Party because it will fail the country economically, that doesn't mean that culturally and geographically it cannot remain safe, because he feels that the NATO will then eventually create a government, a world government that will take over Russia and threaten Russia's safety. Now, going back to this. Today, NATO and the US are almost everywhere in Europe, including Croatia, Poland, and other places that are closer to Russia. Getting closer to Russia means NATO and the US missiles can directly hit Russia. Putin is not stupid. Putin had been complaining ever since when these expansions began. No one listened. Let's make a closer look at NATO and the US activities recently. Number one, they killed Gaddafi of Libya for no reason. Libya was conflict, had internal conflict. Libya, a once peaceful and prosperous country, today lies in ruins with no sober government. Now, if you remember, NATO, under the leadership, by the way, of Hillary Rodham Clinton, who was under the Obama administration, led that takeover of Libya. They called it the Liberation Movement. But in reality, we now realize that the liberation movement was forcefully moved, not because the people were wanting to have freedom, because they didn't get freedom. A lot of the terrorists moved in. And that's all that created, that vacuum created. They got rid of these military dictators, but now terrorists are running these territories. Gaddafi, Libya, who Ezekiel says is going to be aligned with Russia on the day of Armageddon, is going to be aligned with Gog, who leads Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. Libya, the friend of the Russian bear, gets attacked by NATO. And Putin is seeing all this. What was the reason to do all that? There was really no instability, but it created a bigger unstable situation. They tried, well, let's go on. Number two, they killed Saddam of Iraqi and destroyed that country, lying that Iraqi had weapons of they lied that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. No such weapons were found. Today, Iraq lies in ruins with no sober government. Number three, they went to Syria and nearly overthrew Assad had it not been for Russia. Now, Russia at that point was stepping in to help Assad fight, not necessarily going to war, but sending soldiers and sending equipment to help Assad. Now, the Syria conflict, it was entirely an internal problem as well. But people were looking in there like, oh, he's gassing his own people. The thing is, that was an internal problem that he was trying to fight as well with terrorists. Now, I'm not in agreement with what he was doing. Please understand it. I just look at it politically as to what was going on and what's going in the mind of Vladimir Putin and his allies. Number four, they went to a peaceful Afghanistan after the Russians left. Today, Afghanistan is a total mess. If NATO and US had not checked in, they would, make any move to decide to change the government at any time of the world. And then this happens. China, India, Syria, Iraq, etc., and North Korea, those staunch allies to Russia, will support Russia. North Korea, in fact, has started as of last week by testing ballistic missiles again. It was like we were on the eve of a third world war. Now, this North Korea has not been testing anything at all. They stopped. But now, with this new administration, all these people, all these countries are coming back up again and saying there's weakness now. There's a weak man in charge. The bear can come out and say, no more. It's time for me to now defend myself. There's a tiger that's out of the way. And you guys are moving around thinking you're going to threaten me and threaten my country. No way. I'm going to come in and I'm going to wipe you all out. Now, this is all politically. Now, these are Putin's arguments as well, because the Daily Wire reported as well that Maria Baranova, who is the resigned editor-in-chief of Russia Today, also gave it an exclusive report or interview to Fox News and mentioned that she resigned as soon as the invasion began because she was worried about what's going on in Russia, and she's worried that even the Russians are a little confused as to what's going on in the mind of Vladimir Putin. Yes, he's trying to defend them. Yes, he's trying to keep them safe, but at the same time, he's also making some erotic statements. And that's where people are questioning his mental health. Statements like, it is Nazis that he's fighting in Ukraine. Now, I don't know exactly if that's true, because I have not heard that directly from the mouth of Vladimir Putin. But that's what some people are saying, that he is claiming that there's Nazis in Ukraine. If that is true, it could be that we're looking at the generational trauma of Putin's mother popping out in Putin. And we're going to talk a little bit more in regards to his mental health. American Senator Marco Rubio as well said that Putin is not the same Putin of 5 years ago. It seems that he is not all there. And it could be that he was, suffering from COVID and it affected it. So we're going to look into um, that aspect of his mental health. But going back to the political aspect, Marie L. Yavanovich, she was the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. Ukraine, though, once it became independent, had an election and they fully elected a political individual, and she did not approve of it. Barack Obama did not approve of it, and she's very open. And there is a lot of audio again and video and written interviews and messages from her how they got rid of that elected individual and placed in a person who specifically was very anti-Russian and provoked Russia with anger. They called this the UN or the NATO puppet leader of Ukraine. Several resources swear to this and prove it that the new Ukraine is a puppet state for NATO to push and bring in that entire territory from the Russians into NATO alliance. Now, there is a journalist whom I do respect, and his name is Ben Swan, who is actually used to be in my hometown. He has pointed out recently that Ukraine and Russia reached a Minsk agreements since the year 2015 regarding disputed land. Now, what has happened was that there was a lot of Russians with travelers visas in that disputed land, and that disputed land is what Vladimir Putin wants Ukraine to recognize them as being free, but it's not. NATO is going in there and saying, no, we're going to move in. And not only are those places going to remain independent from Russia, they're going to be under Ukrainian rule. And we're going to be putting military bases in that territory. Putin does not like this. Now, before we go on, what is NATO? NATO means the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, meaning these are the countries that got together after World War II to stand and guard the curtain wall against Russian expansion. But Russia sees them as expanding towards the Russian side, and Vladimir Putin says, no way. Now, the NATO is consistent of 28 European countries and 2 North American countries as well. Now, here's where we get controversial. WikiLeaks, who has been known to be an independent but truthful leaker of information, WikiLeaks released damaging amounts of proof and documents that NATO has been enticing Russia and again poking the bear by pushing Ukraine to join NATO, flat out doing it and saying, forget the agreement that you had, forget the Minsk agreement, forget everything else, join NATO, Ukraine, and we will back you up. This was done again under Biden because Biden also, his son, as we all know, had became a millionaire just with no experience of whatever he was doing in regards to diplomacy. All of a sudden became an expert and was giving millions of dollars by Ukraine to cover certain things up as well. So the alliance is there to keep this and keep Ukraine under NATO and bring Ukraine under NATO. Now, let's keep going. Russia then sees this as a threat to their survival, a threat because NATO will now have missiles near their territory. Putin asked the United States to stop the expansion, but there has been no response. On the contrary, WikiLeaks is showing that NATO is pushing Ukraine to join NATO and place missiles there. So Putin is taking this very, very seriously. Upon this, then, Russia asked Ukraine on the 9th of March of the year 2022 that they will stop invading Ukraine if they do 3 things. I want you to hear these 3 things. 1, Ukraine will be demilitarized. That means that there's no military in Ukraine strong enough to attack Russia. Number two, the Ukraine must recognize Crimea as Russian territory because Russia already took it over, but they have to admit this belongs to Russia. And number three, Ukraine must recognize the two regions of its territory as independent countries because they're backed by Russians and there's a large majority of Russians there with a traveler's visa, as mentioned before. These three things to Vladimir Putin seem very reasonable, but not to NATO. This is an opportunity where some people are saying, now let's look into the spiritual, as people are now seeing that there has been a word from international secret society groups. Now, don't discount this. You need to hear this. That provoke wars and want a war so that they can do what's called the Great Reset. Now, that is a big word, and I share quite a bit of details when I talk about whether or not the vaccine is the mark of the beast. I talk a lot about, or I do touch upon the fact that there is something called the Great Reset, and there's people who are controlling international affairs and influencing and wanting war, and through the ages have provoked wars. And it seems that right now, this is an opportunity through this crisis, through the pandemic, through the immigration crisis, to bring this new world order that many people have been talking about. It almost seems like we are seeing an unseen hand come in and come out of world history and involve now Russia. Just some people are thinking the pandemic of the year 2020 moving forward is kind of disappearing now. Now this is coming upon us. What's going on? If you really think about it, it's almost like a well-played strategy. And notice where it came from. It came from China, the ally of Russia. Then what are we hit as a counterattack? The provocation of war against this other alliance that unleashed a painful attack on the whole world. A while back, my wife and I were watching a TV series called Gotham, which is based on Bruce Wayne when he was a little boy and grows into a teenager. But it focuses on those years. But it also shows the beginning and the development of the villains and how they take over Gotham. Almost like in an unbelievable form, we see that. And we feel like, wow, it's like the world is now under this Gotham type of scenario where these weird villains are taking over the world. But that's what we're seeing. Just today I heard how Russia bombed a maternity ward and a children's hospital. And it breaks my heart. Please understand that I am not advocating for you to sympathize with any side here. Up to right now, I have not been one of those that has said, pray for so and so or pray for so and so in regards to countries, because I don't know the full story here. But I do know that, of course, we should seek peace and we should pray for peace and we should pray for all mankind to live in peace. But please also understand that prophecy is going to unveil on this world. And part of that is not that there's always this peace and this hippie kumbaya kind of a situation. Not that God desires death, but that God desires to bring restoration to the world to where it should be. And he has to allow evil to do its part to bring destruction upon the world. Let's look at carefully again at Vladimir Putin's political, mental, and spiritual state. Now we look carefully at the history, the political scientific history, the poli-sci, as you want to call it, of Vladimir Putin's policies and what is driving him in regards to making these actions. Number one, the political analysis, now that you have the basis of this, is that it comes down to NATO versus Russia. According to Vladimir Putin, the sanctions, like with Germany, resulted in more war. And Vladimir Putin is had enough and wants to bring Russia back to its glorious states that they were before. Also, in regards to a political analysis, the ruthless nature of, you know, poking the bear has come about because there's weak leadership in other places, specifically in Western Europe. Putin realizes that he has been done wrong. And now the person that is in charge of the group that has done him wrong is a feeble, senile old man. And he thinks now's the time to get this done and push back so I can take territory back again. That is a political analysis. Number two, mental analysis of Vladimir Putin. Some people are saying that he has dementia or that he suffered from COVID-19. There's a lot of video that shows that there's several, sessions and conferences that Putin had, and he's trying to cover his mouth, and he's coughing, and he can't stop coughing. It could have been COVID-19. It could have been a cold. It could have been the flu. It could have just been a sore throat. It could have just been a bad cough. We don't know. We don't know at all. But I do want to say, every time that people don't like what someone is doing or a political leader that is in office, we right away want to say they're crazy and they need to be put out of office because they lost themselves and they need a good mental evaluation. The thing is, they got elected in there. You don't like it, vote them out. The thing is that in Russia, there's no such thing. And people are afraid now because there's even people who are protesting in Russia that think that his actions are erratic and make no sense. So they think that he probably caught COVID-19. And a lot of people are also saying, or experts are teaching, that COVID-19 affects the brain. And it could cause in some individuals a reaction like if you're under a schizophrenic frenzy or a schizoid affective disorder, which means that you'll have some kind of paranoia and fear that is irrational and untrue. Hence, his fantasy with unreal facts and spreading propaganda that he is fighting Nazis in Ukraine. Now, I want to tell you this. Until right now, I have not seen this. Maybe it will come out. But if that's true, we're looking a lot about the pressure and the patience and the frustration of the agreements that have been broken, political agreements that have been broken that are hurting Russia, and he's been holding off. Maybe he does have some kind of dementia and cognitive decline. And putting those things together, he says, enough's enough. Now's the time to attack and fight. Not only that, we also have transgenerational trauma. The trauma that his mother went through, the trauma that his father went through, and not having good coping mechanisms on how to deal with that trauma, for they were both atheists. Well, his mother claimed to be an Orthodox Christian, but it was nominal. It was not fully practiced because during Soviet aggression and Soviet control, communism rule was atheism and not believe in any God at all. So therefore, even if he did hold or does hold to the Orthodox faith, it's nominal, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. The generational curses are still there. And Putin is suffering from these curses, possibly, and reacting in such a way that makes no sense and feels that total vengeance now and outright war is time to get his vengeance for his ancestors or his country one more time because of what happened in the past. Now, if he is fighting Nazis, if you want to think about that, if he's thinking about that, that is generational trauma because of what they did to his parents, but not to him. Political evaluation, we saw it. Mental evaluation, we saw it. Now, get ready for this, the spiritual evaluation. Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, Revelations chapter 16 and 12 speak to us about how China, Iran, Libya, Turkey, the Middle East, and Russia, the bear, will go and make war in Israel. But they first have to come down through Ukraine. And how interesting that the whole goal in this battle of Armageddon with these countries that are named in the Bible. Now, of course, they have ancient names, for instance, and we know that through history that Iran is called Persia, Iraq is called Babylon. The Romans, of course, are still called Romans, but we don't have Rome particularly. We do have the city of Rome, which is in the Vatican. But a lot of these countries have new names, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist anymore. They exist. But the kings of the Orient are Chinese, the land of China, the Mongols, the Mongolian army. The Russians are clearly identified through history as to who they are in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. Again, the ultimate goal is to come and fight with Israel. But how interesting that right now, whether we are there at that time or not, the president of Ukraine claims to be of the Judaic faith, a Jew. So within time, whether it's right now or not, notice how it still alludes to the same group of people, the same nations that the Bible promises that it will happen in this way. It could just be that we're about to face the Battle of Armageddon. And if we are, within a very short amount of time, we're going to see the revelation of the mark of the beast and the Antichrist. And if not, this situation will go away. But I guarantee you, the same players will come back again when it's time for the end. There's another spiritual aspect that is not necessarily with Bible prophecy, but it does fulfill Bible prophecy. And it is demonic possession. Could it be that Putin, like Marco Rubio says, is a totally different man? It is not because he's a totally different man, but because there's a totally different entity that is now in him and prompting him to react differently, like there is no tomorrow. Like he has a plan, like he has a destiny that he has to carry out, and he only has a certain amount of time. Judas was also political. He felt that Jesus was a political failure. His thought of what a Messiah should be was a disgrace of what, in Judas's eyes, what Jesus was willing to do by going to the cross. It could be that Judas was trying to stop Jesus from go to the cross because he wanted him to fight and be a revolutionary or a zealot and bring freedom to Israel in that way, but not to die. He got in the way, but see, his idea of being stubborn and no matter what, getting it done that way caused him to open his soul and be possessed by Satan. Luke chapter 22, verse 3 specifically talks about how Satan entered Judas to betray the Lord. In the same way, it could be that just like Judas was pushed by the Sadducees to do this, it could be that NATO is provoking Putin to react in such a way to start fulfilling Bible prophecy. And Satan takes advantage of that generational trauma, of the mental decline, and because of Putin's murderous acts, he opens his soul because of his murder of innocent people. And Satan comes in and carries out now, provoking Putin to fulfill Bible prophecy. You don't believe me? In Exodus chapter 9, verse 12, the Bible says how the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart to carry out the purpose of the Israelites leaving Egypt. Now, some people say, well, that's not fair. God purposely hardened Pharaoh's heart. The thing is, Pharaoh already had a determination that no matter what, he was going to be against God's people. So God helped Pharaoh harden his heart so that his main purpose was fulfilled, because that is what Pharaoh wanted to do. It could be that Marco Rubio's right. Up to right now, Putin has been holding off. And although this is what he really wants to do, there's no resolute in him to get it done. But this is what in his heart he wants to get done. So God, in his omniscience, is helping prophecy be provoked and also hardening Putin's heart so that Putin starts acting just like Judas on what he has to do to bring the end through the battle of Armageddon. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3 to 4. I want to share this from the English Standard Version. It says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction, with a comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God." You know, the whole world is at edge. They see what Putin is doing. They don't know if politically he's right. They don't know if mentally he's right. And they don't know if spiritually he's right. Well, I already gave you my evaluation. Politically, can it be solved? It was solved before, back in 2014 and 2018, especially under President Trump's administration. He solved it. He squelched it. It stopped. Can it go away and come back? It will be. It could be that it goes away. It could be that someone kills Putin and the whole conflict ends. But I guarantee you, within time, there's going to be someone in Russia that comes back up again. And this time, I don't care what good policies or what good diplomacy you want to put on the table, Satan will come inside that leader and carry out the battle of Armageddon. It will be Gog leading Magog in a fight with the kings of the east and the northern countries of Africa and the Middle East. Psalm chapter 47, verse 8 through 9 from the NIV reads as follows. God reigns over the nations. God is seated on his holy throne. The nobles of the nations assemble as a people of the God of Abraham, for the kings of the earth belong to God. He is greatly exalted. The word of the Lord. We are to comfort other people because we know that at the end, the kings of the world are in the hands of God. God has the last word in everything, and God knows what's going on in this world. Over everything, his purposes will carry out. I hope that war does not break out. But the sad reality is, every century has seen a world war. Every century has seen international chaos and conflict. And every century has seen how punishing the loser or the person that's getting the negative end of a war or a settlement comes back with vengeance. We need to realize, can this be resolved? I pray to God that it does. There's no need for the death of innocent people, but it can be resolved. But if you notice, there could be a different resolve with this man. He begged the United States to step in and stop the expansion of NATO. It did not happen. But now he's killing people. And there's word that mentally and cognitively he's saying some very interesting things like fighting Nazis. It could be that this confusement of the soul, this confusement of the mind, and this weird, terrible out of character determination of the spirit could be because political ways, he got gypped. He got the raw end of the deal. Mentally, he could be compromised. And spiritually, he could be demonically possessed. Some people say, well, isn't he a believer in the Lord? Isn't he of the Orthodox Christian faith? I'm going to tell you this right now. Just because you go to church does not make you a Christian. Just like you go inside a garage does not make you a car. Just because you're walking around the freezing cold snow does not make you a polar bear. Just because it's nice and cold does not turn you into a snowman, although you might feel like a snowman out in the snow. We are who we are. But only God can turn us, a sinner, into a child of God. See, even though you come to the Lord, there has to be a point where curses are broken or else they come back out. Vladimir Putin acknowledges Christianity, and he says that it helps the culture and it helps the nation, unlike communists in that aspect. But we don't know exactly what's going on if he's saying it out of a cultural reflection, because there's a lot of nominal Christians that say, well, I'm from the South, so I go to this type of church. Or I'm from this, my skin tone is this, so we go to this type of church. Or I've always been in this type of church, but the thing is, there's nothing inside. God desires a true action and a true relationship and a true commitment to your spiritual life and religion. Romans chapter 10, verse 9 through 10 from the NIV reads as follows. If you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. Acts chapter 22, verse 16 reads the follow from the New King James Version. And now, why are you waiting? Arise and be baptized and wash away your sins, calling on the name of the Lord. Now, this is your time to turn to the Lord. See, the thing is that if the Antichrist is going to come out, or you're filled with anxiety, this message in no way is to fill you with anxiety, but it is to alarm you that there's victory for those who are in Christ. Now, if you, for whatever reason, find yourself that you, no matter what, feel that this is not a step for you and you've got something major to overcome, you've got generational curses that are on your life and they're stopping you, call us. Make an appointment, 216-810-6145, or write us an email at pastorsammysalazar.wow@mail.com, pastorsammysalazar.wow@mail.com. But for now, you got to make that commitment to give your life to the Lord. If you believe in your heart that Jesus died on the cross and on the third day he rose from the dead, and you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, that means you give him your life. Lord means that he's in charge of everything. He's the Lord of your life. Now, what makes that seal is that when he's in control, you then submit to the church, and the leaders of the church put you in such a position that you're vulnerable, and it's a representation of how Christ lifts you up and on the last day will resurrect you from the dead. Listen, dead or alive, physically dead or alive, we belong to the Lord. And it is the Lord who will raise the dead. Despite whatever happens here with Russia or Putin or the Antichrist, it is the Lord that we belong to. We cannot walk in fear. We cannot be afraid of the future. We cannot stop and not plan and enjoy our life today. God has wonderful, whether it's snowing, whether it's cold, whether it's freezing cold, whether it's summer, whether it's breezy, whether it's a tropical weather, whether it's dry weather. We need to make the best and enjoy it. But at the end, know that the end is coming and we will enjoy it until the very end. But when the end comes, it will come. We can't ignore it, but at the same time, we have to realize who's involved. What can be done to solve this diplomatic situation with Russia? It's doable. What can be done in regards to demonic possession? We can have deliverance. What can be done in regards to cognitive decline or possibly mental illness? It can be treated. Whatever the situation is, don't let your heart be troubled. Trust in God. Give your life to God, but submit to God through the water baptisms and have your sins washed away. This is Pastor Sammy reminding you we have the victory and we can still, like Joseph, in the times of tribulation and in the times of famine and in the times of war, triumphant, prosper, because we are called to supernaturally walk on water. Join us again and be blessed.